Well, thanks, Pat, and thank you all for coming. Feel free to ask questions as we go along. It's a half hour or so, but like Pat was saying, self-directed, how many people in here have heard of self-directed IRAs? Oh, wow, that's great. How many people have one? Okay, great. So not that many people have one, but it's just starting to spread. More and more stories and Google helping with people thinking of what can my IRA invest in. And when we started New Direction IRA, and we are a provider of IRAs, we do entirely self-directed investments, and that self-direction means that the person who owns the account is the self. They get to decide everything that that IRA is going to do. So compare that to the Fidelities and Schwabs and your local bank. When you have an account with them, what you're going to have access to is whatever they want to sell you. And typically, it's whatever their products are. So if you go to a bank, then they're going to have CDs and savings accounts. Fidelity and Schwab have stocks and bonds and mutual funds because that's what their business is. They're not so concerned with what your business is, and it tends to be investments that are huge and available to everybody. So when we typically start talking to investors, they're thinking of their own IRA. But for this talk, we're really sort of switching it around. So where does money come from for a small business? When we first started in 2003, fortunately, our business didn't need much money. And I'm a CPA in Colorado and had been doing tax returns and small business audits for years and had never come across a self-directed IRA. My partner, Catherine Wynn, had been a real estate investor for years. She discovered that when she retired from her engineering firm, she got this rollover 401k. She got a statement from Payne Weber, showed however much money was in the account. It was all automatically put into stocks. She knew nothing about stocks. She didn't want to learn about stocks. She knew about real estate. So she asked me, why can't my IRA invest in real estate? Surprisingly, the answer was that Payne Weber wouldn't let her. It wasn't that the IRS wouldn't let her. So from that point, we actually became investors, investing our self-directed IRAs, and also started New Direction to help other people figure out how they can maximize their own IRA. So for this topic, finding investment capital. So like Leslie said, going through those traditional methods, first you start with yourself, you go to family and friends, you go to the stock market, or are you going to go public with your small business? Maybe someday, but usually those first few years you're not big enough to go to the stock market. So where else can you go? How many people have heard of OPM? Other people's money. So OPM, because you've used all of your own. So for our business, we didn't need that much money. What we needed, though, was time. So we started New Direction. We had an office, an executive office, but the real work happened in my basement. Doing tax returns for years, I had all the equipment, so I did all the bookkeeping there, and that's when we started with 0 accounts and 0 assets. Currently, we have just over 1.1 billion in assets and about 12,000 accounts. So we've moved out of my basement. But we have the opportunity to think about where else might money come from. So for you guys, when you're thinking of a small business and you've already used your money, or perhaps, like Leslie said, you want to save that personal money for the emergency. So you want to keep that nest egg for operating capital, but you need somebody else to come in. The bank, not going to do it for whatever reason. Maybe it's a restaurant, but you have other people that you've met. Odds are they're not going to raise their hand and say they know about self-directed IRAs. Even after 13 years, we'll see a room of 100 people, probably 5 to 10 have heard. And the bad side about not having heard is that they don't realize that their IRA could potentially be either a lender or an investor in your startup business. They've never thought about it. Never occurred to them. You might have asked them already for their personal money, but how many people have a lot of money sitting in their checking account ready to invest with their neighbor from across the street? Lots of people don't. For me, my pocket seems to leak. So I put $100 in there and the next morning it's 20 and I don't know what happened. But when you have money in an IRA, put $100 in there, it's harder to get it out. So it's much more likely to be parked in that IRA. And for most people, they think once it's in the IRA, they don't have any interaction with it. They can't direct it. But with a self-directed IRA, they can. And we've approached the disclaimer portion of what I'm going to talk about, which is we don't provide any investments. The self is you, the account holder. So New Direction is here to help people learn how to do it, what paperwork they need to have the investment show up in their IRA, to do the IRS reporting, but not to tell you whether it's a good idea or not. So when a client comes to us, they roll money into their account, it's up to them to decide what that money is going to invest in. So for most of our clients, it's not the stock market because they can get that through where the money is now. But they want to invest in something that they know about. Maybe it's your small business. An IRA can actually invest in almost anything. And there are some rules we'll talk about at the end, mostly related to not doing what's called self-dealing. So your own IRA cannot be a funder of your own business. Keep that in mind. But other people's IRAs can. So when you're thinking about sources, think about all the friends and the folks that we'll probably hear about afterwards that you've dealt with in the past that might be in your database. Former customers, successful ones, might be looking for other opportunities. But they don't know to even think about their IRA until you share that with them. So the two things we'll focus on today are private equity, so actually selling an interest in your small business, or, and probably slightly easier, is private lending. So out of our 12,000 accounts, currently about a third of them invest in real estate because that's what they know. The next level up is private lending because they've found a way. Well, lots of people that have IRAs at the bank, they maybe 5 years ago were used to getting 5 or 6%. Now they're getting 0.1, maybe. Maybe it's going to go up to 0.15, but it's not enough to pay for the groceries, so they're looking for better returns. So private lending, make that person, that IRA, actually be the bank. Can't be your own IRA again, but those people that you know, they might be interested in your business. They might be looking for a way of getting more cash flow. So with any of these financing sources, you're going to end up paying something, whether it's an interest rate or giving up a share of ownership. You're going to have to give up something, and you're also going to have to convince that investor that it's a good idea. So be thinking about when you're going to the bank, same sort of questions the bank's going to ask for is, what does that financial statement look like? What are you projecting this business is going to grow to? Lots of times you don't know, but coming up with something to show that investor, and then when they say, oh, I'd love to invest, but gosh, I don't have any money. That's your opportunity to say, just went to this class down at New Business, Minnesota and discovered, holy mackerel, my IRA can be an investor. I can get it out of the stock market and put it into someplace where I can walk by and peer in the window and see what's going on in that business, or actually own a portion of it. How many people have heard of Mitt Romney's $100 million IRA? $100 million, because it was a self-directed IRA and he invested it in a business or several businesses that he knew were going to do well. And all that money, all the profit from those investments, because the IRA bought it, stays in the IRA. I didn't have the opportunity to invest in those things because he wasn't our client, but also that really gives you the opportunity to keep an eye locally looking for investment possibilities. So for your own IRAs, look for other businesses that are starting up. But if you're looking for capital, think about the people that you know that have confidence in you, that are going to believe in the business that you're creating and are willing to have their retirement funds invest in that business. Somebody has a bright idea. The bright idea that came in the middle there was somebody's new business that started. They have a great idea that's going to turn into a lot of money. They hope. It's going to be a lot of work usually, But private lending, so what does that look like? It can be short-term, can be the 5-year plan, can be the 1-year plan, anything that you and that IRA owner works out, whatever makes sense for both sides. Long-term lending can be a 30-year mortgage, whatever you decide. The terms of it, secured or unsecured, it's all up to you. Our clients will do whatever they're comfortable with. Sometimes they shouldn't, because it turns out badly, but these are investments. So that whoever you're working with that has the IRA, they're really the investor. They're making every decision about that investment. So your job looking for money from them is to convince them that they're going to get it back. How are you going to do that? Well, probably the same way you do it with a bank, by showing them that the business is going to turn out well. The same thing for equity. So are you going to sell shares of your business? That's what IBM did. It's turned out well for them. Where are you going to start? Well, because private equity, you're going to need a structure. So is it a corporation that you're creating? Is it going to have shares? So you'd actually be selling shares or a portion of that company off to somebody else. And they're going to own it, for better or worse. So if it turns into the next Apple computer, they're going to own whatever percentage that is. So think carefully. You really want to give up that much ownership. That's why more people probably go to the private lending side of the world. But sometimes that lender will only lend if you give up a share of the business. So, and these are things you can talk about with your own accountants and your tax advisors, your attorneys. But either of these options, it's really the same thing that big companies do. But with a self-directed IRA, your friends and family and cohorts and past and future customers can use their retirement funds that they already have to invest. And they've never thought about it. That's important to tell them. Even their health savings account. So a health savings account can be self-directed. With Obamacare, the number of health savings account has expanded greatly. That money goes into an account just like an IRA, can be invested. My own health savings account owns a share of a piece of real estate in Hawaii. I can't use it, which is sometimes very sad, but I can think about picturing myself there on the lanai. Some of the structures for private lending, mortgages, everybody knows a mortgage, 30-year mortgage, 15-year mortgage, particularly if there's an asset that you might be buying, maybe it's real estate, that someone else would lend you money on. More like traditional banking, secured or unsecured loans, bridge loans. So say that first year, you really need that money to get started, but you see cash flow coming after a couple of years. So you're not going to need that loan for long, but to get you through the next year. Questions so far? Is this new stuff for anybody? Anybody thinking of, during the break, calling a friend, seeing if they have an IRA? Now's the time. It's fresh in your mind. Plus, we have some info in the back that you can show them. So one of the challenges is that, so for me as a CPA for 30 years, not having heard of it, you start to wonder if it's real. And the reason that I'd never heard of it is because the companies that were pushing IRAs were pushing their own stuff. So if you call the securities company, they're going to say, no, you can't do it, because they won't let you do it with their IRA. Yes?
Is it easier to raise funding this way instead of doing VC?
Probably, because with venture capital, they typically are going to be doing a whole lot more small companies, and they're usually charging a lot more, usually in terms of ownership percentage, but they have more money. So your typical IRA, our average account size is about $85,000 for our clients, so you're not going to be able to come in and borrow $3 million unless you get a whole bunch of IRAs usually. But venture capital, always an option, and venture capital can be part of a self-directed IRA as well. Yes?
I don't have questions, more of a statement. I got a friend who has one of these, and he went to an accountant who I don't think he knew all the nuances of how self-directed worked. The The problem with that is if any little part, small part goes wrong, whatever you're invested in becomes mainly taxable that year. And so he's facing a very large tax bill now. So if you're going to do something like this, make sure you talk to a pro, like the guy here, because you can avoid those loopholes on it. Because next thing you know, if you come next year and you're like, oh my God, I have a $50,000 tax obligation this year. It's like, great, what did I just do all my time and effort in doing?
Right. So we'll get to the rules about what you can't do, but it's an important point. This, although the investment itself is the same as you and I would do with our own personal cash, inside the IRA, you have to be aware that it is an IRS allowed account, and there are certain rules. So being careful, and the biggest one is don't borrow from yourself or have a transaction with yourself. So that one's kind of easy to avoid, but still make sure you work with somebody who understands. And that's why New Direction, probably most of our marketing is really education. So events like this, we're not here to sell New Direction, but sell the idea and open the door for a lot of potential investors to use that retirement money in a way that's going to make them more money. Because you want your IRA, or at least most people do, to be the $100 million IRA, or at least heading up to get to that point as close as you can. But what investments are in there is what's going to do it. Private equity, the IRS allows shares of a company to be held, just like shares of IBM or a mutual fund. Private equity, same thing. Key again, your IRA cannot invest in your own company. And that's where people get into trouble by taking advantage of their access to that money to invest in something that they shouldn't. And if you own the company or a portion of the company, sometimes you can invest, but that's again when you would want to call and talk to somebody who really understands the rules. We can show them to you. The details of the transaction are still up to you. So why would anybody want to do this with their IRA? Why would they want to invest in your company? Because any profit that comes from that investment is going to come back to that IRA. Why would anybody buy shares of a mutual fund? Same reason. So this is all the same stuff as everyone has ever done with their IRA. Try and make it grow the fastest and be the biggest IRA when they get to retirement that it possibly can be. So this is not magic, but it gives you a way of investing in something that's local, something that you can keep an eye on, something that gives you inside knowledge. So for a lot of our real estate investors, they've done it before for years. They understand how real estate works. They take their IRA money and buy more real estate so that they can make more money. An IRA can actually borrow money as well. So topic for a different course next time, but I want to highlight the things that your IRA cannot do. So the IRS has a book called the Internal Revenue Code that talks about, first, the creation of IRAs, how much money you can put in, when you have to start taking money out, all the stuff that all of your local CPAs and accountants and probably you already know. Same rules are going to apply to a self-directed IRA. Because really the only difference with self-direction is that you get to choose the investments rather than picking from a list that somebody else has provided for you. Disqualified persons. So it starts with you, and it includes also your spouse, parents, grandparents, children, their spouses, grandchildren and their spouses. All of those people are disqualified persons, meaning that none of these people can have a loan to your IRA or to your small business or be an investor in that small business. So when you're thinking about friends and family, take this list of family people off because their IRA cannot invest in your company. Leaves quite a few people off. All the folks in green are not disqualified, so all of those folks can be investors, plus everybody else you know. Everybody else at your business that you've worked with, schoolmates, customers, all of those people are likely to have a retirement plan and likely to be able to move that plan to a self-directed account and invest in your business. but only if you tell them about it and ask for their money and convince them that it's a good idea. So what things can't you do? Specifically, selling something you already own to or from your IRA, buying something from your IRA, being paid by your IRA, extending credit to your IRA, the big one for today, have personal use of the assets in your IRA, and pledging a personal loan. So your IRA cannot help you in your own small business, but if it's somebody else's IRA, then it can. So what's the process? Well, the first thing you do is get a self-directed IRA. So for our company, we have an online account application, much like any IRA, social security number, beneficiaries, address, all of that stuff. Generally, the IRA can be opened within 24 hours. So you've got an IRA bucket there. Doesn't have any money in it until you move money from somewhere else. So if your clients or your investors are wanting to invest, wanting to lend, first thing to do, open an IRA and get money into it. Because it's just an IRA, it can have contributions every year, $5,000 or $6,000 or up to $52,000 for SEP IRAs. Most of the time, people are moving money from an existing IRA that does have money, and they're just moving it over to the self-directed account because they can make whatever investments they want through the self-directed account, and they can't where it is. No tax consequence for moving it, as long as you do a transfer, and that's something that we can help with. But in the meantime, that investor needs to be thinking about what are they going to invest in. So if a client opens a new account with us, transfers $100,000 in, it's going to sit there until they tell us that they want that $100,000 to be invested somehow in your business. How is it going to be invested? Is it going to be this doesn't have a light. Is it going to be invested as equity? Is it going to be invested as a loan? What's a loan look like? All of those documents have to be created by somebody, maybe an attorney, maybe you have them yourselves, but all of those investments can be just like it was your own personal cash. So we need documentation. The money that moves over, what kind of questions is a potential lender going to ask? Probably the same as the bank would ask. So be ready to answer those. Once the money's in the account, the account holder, tells us to send that money to the investment. So your business goes over there and you put it to work. So New Direction IRA website, newdirectionira.com. Feel free to visit there for any questions you have. But right now, if anybody has, yes, sir.
Could you share performance of your company?
Our company or the investments?
Either way.
Well, our company, as I said, started from zero and has grown every year. Or last 2 years actually, have been roughly 20% growth each year because the word of self-direction is spreading and more people are getting a little suspect about the stock market and are looking for other investments. So they'll go online and say, what can my IRA invest in? Up pops real estate or up pops private lending. So our company is growing very fast. Our competitors, they're all private and probably 10 or so nationwide. And we're not huge, but not tiny either. So our prospects are great. As far as the investments that our clients make, we don't pay much attention to it because we're not involved. So we record the money coming in, we record the money coming out, but we're not sending out reports of how well your fund or your investment did because it's up to you. So it's important with self-direction. I like to say self is the greatest thing ever and it's the worst thing ever. It's great because you get to do everything that's done. You get to decide every single piece of the investment, good, bad, everything. So the bad part of self-direction and the bad part of the self is that you have to decide. Because we're not going to call you and say, oh, I see you wanted to buy oceanfront property in Arizona. that might be a bad idea. What we're going to say is we want to make sure we have good title to it. So all the decision making is up to you. And it's different. It's shifting a lot of responsibility to the account holder to make good decisions, or to hire somebody to help them. So you might ask your CPA, assuming they know what they're doing. The investment part, it's the same as any investment. So if somebody understands investing in small businesses, same rules are going to apply whether they're doing it personally or with their IRA, as far as is the investment itself a good idea. Yes.
Can the IRA account holder have any interest in like an LLC that invests in the self-directed IRA? Or can they have no interest?
They might be able to have some interest. So going back to that picture, all of these red folks cannot have a transaction with the IRA. But they can have a transaction at the same time as the IRA into something new. So say me, if it was my IRA and my mother wanted to invest in something, if we did it together, 50-50, my IRA and her, they'd be having a transaction together, but they wouldn't be having a transaction between them, because they'd be standing side by side buying a proportionate interest in something. So in that event, it's okay. But it's an interesting thing to think about with the number of LLCs you see popping up. Everyone wants to start an LLC immediately, and they think the LLC is different from them. But if any of these folks in red own an LLC, it's the same as the person in red doing the investment. So an LLC doesn't shield you from these rules. They all pass through. Yes.
So if you invest in a business, what happens at the time of RMD?
So at RMD age 71 and a half for traditional IRAs, you have to start taking out a portion each year, 3 to 5%, depending on how long the IRS thinks you're going to live. And you have to take it each year. So one of the nice features of private equity or lending is you can take a slice of that loan out as a distribution. Of course, it's easier to write a check out of your IRA and take cash, but if you have an investment in Apple Computer in your IRA, you can take shares out. And the value of that share would be what shows up on your 1099. Another, just thinking about that too, this applies to traditional IRAs, to Roth IRAs, to 401ks in some cases, to health savings accounts. All of those plans can be self-directed. You just need somebody like New Direction to provide you the bucket. And whatever goes on in there is up to you. Anybody thought of anybody they're going to call looking for money? They're not going to call you, guaranteed. You have to start thinking, everybody that you've ever worked with, as you go through your ACT database, do they have an IRA? Do I like them? Do I want them to be somebody I work with? Check can probably create a field, potential IRA investor. But you actively have to think about it. They're not going to call you. And even if you talk to them just in the normal course of business, even if they've invested with you already or lent you money, the IRA is just not on their radar because they're so used to it coming in a form of a statement from Wall Street. It's amazing the number of people that, oh, shoot, I wish I had money, but I don't. They never think of that pot of money, which is really the most important pot that they have. It's their retirement funds, which might make them a little more cautious to invest with you, or might make them really excited to invest with you because they see the potential of your new business. You never know. So ask everybody. Once they say, oh, how does that work? You can send them over to us to explain the process. We have educational material on our website as well. We're also happy to do these kind of presentations that talk about the process. It's not hard, but it's different. And it's a little scary because, oh, I've never done this before and I've been investing for all this time. And once they understand the investment is the same, it's just following the rules for the IRA. Not that hard, but it's easier to say that looking back on it after you've done it than looking forward to think of something new. So that's where New Direction is really there to help handhold them through the process. Jessie Vasquez in the back is our local office representative. She just started, so don't ask her too many hard questions yet, but give her another few weeks and she'll be up to speed. But we have 62 people back in Boulder, Denver area that are happy to help, and no question is hard. Pat?
Could you tell them a little bit about the portal that you have? One of the things in your article is that if somebody is investing in your business and you have a way of or you're investing in someone else's, you have a way to see payments. Are they being made? Are they late? Are they on time? You're not having to handle all this paperwork. It's really...
Sure. So one of the things, this bucket is your IRA's bucket. So the money that goes in there doesn't show up in your personal account. It has nothing to do with your personal account. And when we started, everything that went in there was attached to a piece of paper, usually that you sent in to us. And one of the frustrating things was somebody that's used to going online and paying their bills. Go online, there was no such thing as that for self-direction. So we've spent the last 3 years creating what we call the My Direction portal, where you can go and see all the activity in your account. If you happen to own real estate, you can direct us to pay bills, the property taxes, the HOA bills, but you can also go in and see payments coming in. You can actually have your company set up to make payments automatically through ACH or online bill pay to the account. So you get a notice when money comes in, so you don't have to be quite as active monitoring what's going on in there, but you can be as active as you want. So our goal is to move self-directed accounts more towards the online banking model than the past, which was stacks of paper. Yes?
When the IRA, self-directed IRA purchases real estate, that's titled in the name of the individual IRA account holder, right?
Right.
How is that protected from judgments and so forth in process when it's personally in the name of that account holder, even though the IRA itself would be exempt from execution?
So it is personal only in the fact that it has your name in it. But for our clients, the titling is a little long, but FBO, for the benefit of so New Direction IRA for the benefit of Joe's IRA. So it's the same titling as the account at Fidelity or Schwab has. So the court would say, oh, that's an IRA. It's protected from creditors via the federal protection that...
That's on the deed?
Right.
Okay.
Yes?
If all the changes are happening with the Department of Labor on fiduciary rules, who is all the fiduciary in this transaction?
So New Direction and all of the self-directed providers are only providers of holding the asset, not selling the asset. So although, depending on which lawyer you're talking to, reading those fiduciary rules, you might think that anybody who offers you access to something might be a fiduciary, but hopefully when the dust settles, it'll be clear that self-directed providers, because they're not selling anything, are not going to be fiduciaries. Almost everybody else that sells investments could easily fall into that. And there's a lot of
There is none?
a lot of worry out there amongst advisors. Becoming a fiduciary is a bad thing in general, because it means you're responsible for what happens with the investment that you're involved with. So,
But wouldn't the owner, because he is technically selling the investment to friends or whatnot, become a fiduciary at that point?
typically, and that's more of a across the hall lawyer question than an accountant question, but the seller of the business interest themselves is not selling an investment, they're selling a part of their company, compared to an investment advisor who works out the deal, bringing in the investor and the business at the same point. So if you want to sell a portion of your business, you're not in the business of selling that, you're just looking for investors. But it's something to be aware of. At one extreme, nobody's going to be able to invest in anything. At the other extreme, it's your business and you're trying to make it succeed, not for them, but for yourself. So The trouble comes when something doesn't work. So, yes, ma'am.
Then how do you track the performance of your investment? Is that through the portal or?
Well, do you, by each investment by itself. So if it's a loan, you look at your IRA and see if the payments were made or see if it was paid back at the end. If it's equity, then you probably have to wait until that company starts to produce profits and pay out investments, or if it's sold at the end. So it's investment by investment. Odds are, if you are keeping an eye on it, and you know the person that's doing it, potentially you could do better than you could do on Wall Street, depending on the investment that you make. But it is still an investment. It can go up and down for your IRA or for your own personal funds. Saw another question. Maybe not. Pat, anything else? All right. Great. Thanks for coming.